I'm Jessica, and up until I turned 28, the most exciting thing that had happened in my life was when the accounting firm I worked at switched from PCs to Macs. Not exactly thrilling stuff. But then, one night at a friend's birthday party, everything changed. I was standing in the corner of a crowded living room, holding a soda and feeling awkward in my too tight dress. The music was loud, too loud to talk, but apparently perfect for him, Andrew. He was taller than most, which is probably why he noticed me. He walked over confidently, making my heart race. "Hey, you're Jessica, right?" His voice was clear, even over the pounding music. "Yeah, and you are?" I asked, trying to sound calm as I sipped my drink. "Andrew, I've seen you around. Mind if I join you?" He didn't wait for a response, just stood beside me. "Not at all," I said, barely heard over the pop song blasting through the speakers. "So, Jessica, what brings you here tonight?" he asked casually, though his eyes seemed focused. "Just here for Karen's birthday. You know her?" "Yeah, we went to college together. She keeps inviting me to these things. Can't say no, can I?" He shrugged, and we both laughed. It felt easy, natural. "I get it. I work with her. She's hard to say no to," I replied. "An accountant, right?" she mentioned. He nodded like he already knew. "Yep, that's me. Numbers are my thing," I joked, though I never found spreadsheets that funny. "Sounds exciting," he said with a grin, and I couldn't tell if he was teasing or not. "Oh, totally. It's all wild parties and high stakes in the world of accounting." We laughed again, and for the first time, I felt comfortable talking to someone who seemed genuinely interested. "Want to get some air?" he asked, motioning towards the backyard. I nodded, glad to escape the noise. Outside, the cool air was refreshing. "So, what brings a guy like you to a party like this?" I asked, trying to sound confident. "Just looking for a good time," he said with a smile. "Maybe I was also looking for someone cool to hang out with," he said with a smile that made the corners of his eyes crinkle. We chatted about everything and nothing: movies, books we liked, and how he was into graphic design but stuck in a job he didn't love. It felt like we had known each other forever. As the night came to an end, he pulled out his phone. "Can I get your number? I'd really like to see you again, Jessica." I hesitated for a second, not used to this kind of attention, but something about him felt right. "Sure," I said, typing my number into his phone. He smiled, his face lighting up. "Great, I'll call you. We should go out, just the two of us." "Sounds good," I managed to say, my stomach doing flips. I watched him leave, still in disbelief that this was my life now. Maybe turning 28 wasn't so bad after all. Maybe it was just the beginning of something great. The days after Andrew called went by in a blur, and before I knew it, I was getting ready for our first date. I was so nervous. I didn't have much experience with dating. I picked out a simple blue dress, nothing too fancy, but I hoped it looked good. Andrew showed up right at 9. His car was a clean, well-kept sedan, not flashy, but it suited him. When I got in, he smiled at me, and it was the kind of smile that could make you weak in the knees. "You look great, Jessica." "Thanks," I mumbled, feeling my face turn red. "You look nice too." We went to a cozy little Australian restaurant he knew. The food smelled amazing, but my nerves had my stomach in knots. He ordered pasta with a fancy sauce, and I stuck to simple marinara. "So, Jessica, tell me something about you that no one else knows," he asked, twirling his spaghetti effortlessly. I chuckled, more focused on playing with my food than eating it. "Well, I'm pretty boring, but not many people know I can solve a Rubik's Cube in under a minute." He raised his eyebrows. "Really? That's pretty impressive. You'll have to show me sometime." "Sure," I said, starting to relax. "What about you? Got any hidden talents?" "I make a killer breakfast burrito," he said with a grin. "Best you'll ever have." "I'll take your word for it. Maybe you can prove it sometime," I teased. The conversation flowed, and for the first time in a long while, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. The next few weeks flew by as we spent more time together. Andrew would come over after work, or I'd meet him for lunch near his office. He introduced me to his favorite spots around town, hidden gems I'd never noticed before. I had never noticed the city like this before. It felt like I was seeing it for the first time. Things got serious when Andrew asked me to meet his parents, Charles and Shirley. They lived in a small but cozy house, filled with family photos and little decorations. As soon as we walked in, Shirley hugged me tightly. "Oh, we've heard so much about you, dear," she said, smiling warmly. "She's lovely, Mom," Andrew said, and I could see he was happy. We sat down for dinner, and the conversation flowed easily. "So, Jessica, Andrew tells us you're an accountant. That must be interesting," Charles said as he passed me the potatoes. "It has its moments," I replied. "Mostly just numbers, but I like the order of it." "And how's your family?" Shirley asked, genuinely interested. "They're good, thanks. My dad's a businessman, always busy, but he's been really supportive of me." Everything was happening quickly, but it felt right. It was like my whole life had led up to this moment. For the first time, I felt like someone truly saw me not just as a regular accountant, but as something more. A few months into our whirlwind romance, Andrew and I were walking by the riverbank. The city lights reflected on the water, giving everything a postcard-like beauty. "Jessica, I've been thinking," Andrew said, stopping and turning to face me. "Yeah?" I asked, my heart starting to beat faster. "I don't want to wait any longer. I know this is fast, but will you marry me?" Just like that, my world changed. Without hesitation or doubt, I said, "Yes, Andrew, I'll marry you." The whirlwind didn't stop there. Soon after, I introduced Andrew to my dad, and they hit it off right away. My dad appreciated Andrew's honesty and how much he cared about me. "He's a good man, Jessica," Dad said, giving his approval, which meant everything to me. So, we got married. It wasn't a huge, fancy wedding, but it was perfect for us. I even loved the way I looked in my wedding dress, something I hadn't expected. Smiling, I shared pictures on social media, happy to show my joy to friends and family. After the wedding, life didn't slow down, it sped up. We barely had time to enjoy our newlywed life when Andrew suggested something big. "Hey, Jessica, I've been thinking," he said one evening while we unpacked another box of wedding gifts in our small apartment. "How about we move in with my folks?" I paused, holding a coffee mug. "Live with your parents?" He nodded, looking serious. "Yeah. They're getting older, and I'd feel better if we were there to help out. Plus, it'd save us money on rent." It made sense, I guess, but moving in with the in-laws? That felt like something out of a sitcom. "Are you sure they'd want us there all the time?" I asked. "Absolutely," Andrew said confidently. "Mom's been hinting about it since we got engaged. It'll be good, trust me." So, 3 weeks later, we pulled up to his parents' house with all our stuff packed in boxes. Andrew's mom, Shirley, was already on the porch, waving before we even got out of the car. "Oh, Jessica, we're so thrilled to have you both here," she exclaimed, pulling me into a tight hug. Charles, Andrew's dad, gave him a pat on the back. "Welcome home, son. And you too, Jessica." The house was cozy, but packed with old furniture that looked like it belonged in a museum from the 1965s. I forced a smile, but I already missed our little apartment. Andrew noticed. "It's going to be great, you'll see," he whispered as we carried the boxes inside. The first few days were a big adjustment. Shirley was always around, constantly popping into our room to ask if we needed anything. "Just making sure you're comfortable," she'd chirp, while I tried not to cringe at the lack of privacy. One evening, we all sat down for dinner, Andrew, me, Charles, and Shirley. The conversation was pretty dull until Andrew dropped a bombshell. "So, the house needs some major repairs," he said casually mid-bite of meatloaf. I nearly choked on my mashed potatoes. "Repairs?" "Yeah, the roof's in bad shape and the plumbing is ancient," he explained. Charles nodded seriously. "We were thinking," Andrew continued, avoiding my eyes, "that maybe we could all chip in for the costs." I glanced at Shirley, who was suddenly very focused on her plate. "All of us?" I asked. "Well, I just got a pay cut at work," Andrew mumbled. "So, I'm a bit short right now." There it was. I felt a knot form in my stomach. "I'll see what I can do," I said, even though I wanted to say a lot more. Shirley looked up, tears in her eyes. "Oh, Jessica, that would be so helpful." You're such an angel. The next few weeks were a blur of contractors and repairs. I wrote checks and smiled through clenched teeth while Shirley gushed about how great the house was starting to look. Charles gave me a pat on the back. You're really part of the family now, Jessica. Part of the family? More like the part that pays for everything. One particularly tough day, after making more expensive decisions, I collapsed on the bed, completely drained. Andrew came in and sat next to me. Thanks for handling all this, Jessica, he said, sounding almost sincere. It's fine, I lied, staring at the ceiling. I just didn't realize it would cost so much. He squeezed my hand. It'll all be worth it. This is for our future, right? Our future, I echoed, not really sure whose future we were building anymore. As I lay there, listening to Andrew's steady breathing, I couldn't help but wonder if moving in was the right choice. But there was no turning back now. I was in too deep, and I had to see it through no matter the cost. After the renovations, the house looked amazing, like something from a magazine. Despite the financial strain, I felt a little proud when I looked around. We decided to have a small dinner party to celebrate, just the 5 of us. But that's when things took a turn. In the middle of dinner, as we were laughing and sharing stories, Shirley suddenly got quiet. The mood shifted, and the room felt heavy. She looked at Charles, then at us, her eyes filling with tears. We need to tell you both something important, she said, her voice shaky. Andrew and I exchanged worried looks. What's going on? I asked, feeling a knot form in my stomach. Charles sighed deeply. The house, it's heavily mortgaged. We owe $550,000, and if we don't pay it off in 3 months, the bank will take it. My fork dropped onto my plate. What? You mean after all the repairs we just paid for? Shirley started crying. We were ashamed. We thought we could handle it, but after all the repairs, there's just no way. It felt like I was trapped in a nightmare. All the money, all the effort for a house that wasn't even safe from being taken away. So, what are you saying now? I asked, my voice sharper than I meant. Andrew hesitated, avoiding eye contact. I was hoping maybe, Jessica, you could talk to your dad. Are you serious? I snapped, my voice rising. Ask my dad for $550,000? It's just with his help, the house would be secure for us, for our future, Andrew said, pleading. Shirley's sobs got louder, and I felt like the bad guy in this crazy situation. Please, Jessica, she cried. This is our home. We've spent decades here. I was furious, but their tears and desperation wore me down. I'll think about it, I muttered, feeling trapped. The next day, I reluctantly called my dad and explained the situation. To my surprise, he agreed to help, but with one condition. I'll give the money, Jessica, but only if we have a formal agreement. I want everything documented, he said. When I told Andrew, he wasn't happy. Why does it have to be so formal? Can't he just trust us? It's $550,000, Andrew. That's a lot of money. He's just being cautious, I said, feeling the distance growing between us. He'll get his paperwork, Andrew muttered, clearly annoyed. We got the paperwork drawn up, and the money was transferred. Shirley and Charles were relieved, thanking me constantly, but things between Andrew and me felt different. There was a coldness between us that hadn't been there before. Just when I thought things couldn't get worse, tragedy hit out of nowhere. Jessica, it's your Aunt Emma, came a shaky voice over the phone. Your dad, he had a heart attack. It's bad. My heart sank. What? How is he? She paused, then said the words I never expected to hear. He didn't make it. Honey, I'm so sorry. And Emma's voice echoed through the phone. I almost dropped it. No, that can't be right, I mumbled, feeling numb. I hung up and turned to see Andrew standing in the doorway. What's wrong? He asked, his voice low. My dad, he's gone, I managed to say before breaking down in tears. Andrew came over and put his arm around me, but it felt like I was being hugged by a stranger. I'm sorry, Jessica, he said, and while he sounded sincere, I was too deep in my grief to fully take it in. After another exhausting day of funeral planning, I came home earlier than usual. I expected the house to be quiet, but as I unlocked the door, I heard voices coming from the living room. It was Andrew, speaking to his parents in a frustrated tone. I can't do this anymore. Living with her is driving me crazy. She's ugh, it's too much, Andrew complained. His mom, usually so kind and understanding, responded in a sharp whisper. You just have to hold on a little longer, Andrew. We need to figure out what to do with those receipts from her father. Jessica has them now. The sooner I'm out, the better. I'll grab those receipts, destroy them, and then I'll move on with that rich woman I told you about. Andrew's voice was cold, calculating. A chill ran down my spine. Here I was, mourning my father, while the people I trusted were plotting behind my back. They weren't the loving family I thought I had married into. They saw me as nothing more than a way to solve their money problems. Anger and shock surged through me, but I knew I had to stay calm. I slammed the door loudly, pretending I had just walked in, cutting off their scheming. Oh, Jessica, you're back early. How did the funeral plans go? Shirley's voice instantly shifted to one of concern, her eyes wide with fake innocence. I forced a smile, even though my stomach churned. It's all coming together. Thanks for asking. I caught a quick glance they exchanged, their faces masked with false concern. It made my skin crawl, knowing their real intentions. But I realized now wasn't the time to show my hand. I needed to be smart, protect what was mine, and maybe even get some justice for their deceit. The funeral was somber, filled with quiet condolences and heavy grief. But when we returned to Andrew's parents' house, their true colors began to shine through. As we sat in the living room, sipping lukewarm coffee, Andrew's charming facade crumbled. With a cold laugh, he looked directly at me and said, Jessica, pack your things. You need to get out. I've got someone else now, someone better, Andrew said. His words should have hurt, but I pretended to be shocked. Before I could respond, Shirley chimed in with a nasty laugh. We've really had enough of you, dear. We only kept you around for your money. What about the house? I asked, trying to sound innocent. The house I paid to fix? The $550,000 I spent. Shirley laughed even harder, like I had told the funniest joke. Oh, sweetie, this house is ours. You're nothing here. Andrew's smirk widened. And those receipts you're so proud of? I found them at your dad's house and burned them. They're gone. For a moment, I let them think they had won. Then I couldn't help it, I burst out laughing. My reaction threw them off, and their smiles started to fade. Why are you laughing? What's so funny? Andrew demanded. Wiping away a tear, still chuckling, I replied, You three are pathetic. You think you're so clever? The receipts you destroyed? They were just copies. The real ones are safe with my lawyer. Their faces went pale, and Andrew's arrogance quickly turned to panic. You can't prove anything, he stammered. I can, and I will, I said firmly. Now, I want my money back, all of it, or my next call is to the police. Andrew and Charles exchanged nervous glances. The confidence they had moments ago was gone. Charles, usually so bold, started to plead, Jessica, please, let's talk about this. We can work something out. With the truth out and all the power in my hands, the negotiations dragged on longer than I expected. It was clear they were trying every trick to shift things in their favor, but I wasn't backing down. Look, it's simple, I said firmly during one of our many discussions at the kitchen table, now legally mine. The house gets transferred to my name in exchange for the IOUs. That's the deal. No more games. Finally, they gave in. We agreed to make everything official and legal. I insisted that everything be handled by a lawyer with proper paperwork.
I emfasissa.
At the lawyer's office, the atmosphere was tense as the documents were signed and notarized. I watched closely as every signature was applied, making sure there was no room for any further tricks. Once everything was finalized, I knew I had won. I gathered the documents for the house transfer and turned to Andrew's mother, who looked defeated but still carried a trace of her old self. I'll be keeping these in a safe place, I said, holding up the papers before slipping them into a folder, just to make sure no one tries anything. With the legal stuff handled, the divorce process was straightforward. Andrew stayed quiet, his earlier arrogance gone. When the final papers were signed, I felt a huge weight lift off my shoulders. It was like closing a chapter. On the day they moved out, I stood on the porch of my now fully owned house, watching Andrew, his mom, and Dad load their things into a rental van. They moved slowly, and the mood was somber. I felt a mix of satisfaction and sadness. This wasn't how I thought my marriage would end, but given the situation, it was the best outcome. After things settled down, and I began to enjoy my newfound peace, I heard through friends that Andrew was in a tough spot. His new girlfriend had dumped him shortly after our divorce, and his parents were now living in a cramped apartment, far from the comfort they once had. Karma had come for them quicker than I expected. Despite their situation, they started reaching out to me, calling and messaging, probably hoping to worm their way back into my life, or at least my house. But I was done with their lies. I blocked their numbers without a second thought and cut them off on social media. It felt freeing, finally breaking the last ties between us. One afternoon, as I was enjoying a quiet moment with a book in my living room, there was a knock at the door. Peeking through the peephole, I saw Andrew standing there, looking pitiful, holding a bouquet of flowers. The nerve of it made me laugh. I opened the door and couldn't help but chuckle at the sight of him. "Really, Andrew? Flowers?" He shifted uncomfortably, the flowers wilting along with his confidence. "Jessica, I've realized so many things. I was wrong, terribly wrong. Remember when I told you disgusted me?" I interrupted, leaning against the door frame, amused by his discomfort. "What changed, Andrew? Did you run out of options?" He looked down, clearly ashamed. "I made mistakes, but I'm here to make things right." I shook my head, almost feeling sorry for him almost. "You're not here to make things right, Andrew. You're just desperate to get back to your old, comfortable life. But guess what? That life doesn't exist anymore, not for you." His face fell, and he took a step back, as if my words had hit him like a punch. "Jessica, please," he started. "Save it." I cut him off, my voice sharp. "I was done. I want you to leave. Don't come back. We're done forever." Andrew stood there for a moment, his hope fading away. Without saying anything, he turned and walked off, his shoulders slumped in defeat. I went back to my book, a small smile on my face. The quiet in the house felt like a warm, comforting blanket, so different from the chaos that once filled it. I was finally at peace, living life on my own terms. No flowers or sweet words could change that. I was truly, finally free.